watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani.
And me, Lou Brown, and we're ready to wake you up with the key headlines from across the world and in the region.
Here are your top stories. French President Emmanuel Macron meets Chinese leader Xi Jinping for trade talks.
Israeli strikes kill 5 people, including 2 children near Khan Yunis in Gaza.
And clashes between students and security forces break out at Senegal's main university over financial aid. First this morning, French President Emmanuel Macron has met with China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing. It's the French leader's 4th visit to the Chinese capital as Europe seeks to rebalance economic and security threats from the world's second largest economy.
Macron will also meet with China's top leadership in an effort to navigate tense economic relations and push for movement on the war in Ukraine. It's the second day of Macron's 3-day state visit to the country. Here's more on that story.
China's President Xi Jinping welcomed his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Beijing on Thursday. It's the second day of Macron's 3-day state visit to China. The 2 leaders attended a welcome ceremony before opening talks aimed at navigating economic and security tensions between Europe and the world's second largest economy. Macron's 4th state visit is focused on trade at a time when the European Union faces a significant deficit with China, with growing concerns over trade, security, and diplomatic relations. And with Washington's tariffs squeezing global trade, Beijing is seizing the opportunity to present itself as a partner for business, hoping to mollify European concerns over China's backing for Russia and its state-subsidized industrial model. During the visit, Macron is expected to urge Xi Jinping to press Russia towards agreeing to a ceasefire in Ukraine. According to the French presidency, Macron will stress that China must refrain from providing any means, by any means, to Russia to continue the war. In Beijing, alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping, Macron will hold talks with Premier Li Qiang and China's top lawmaker Zhao Leji before traveling on Friday to the sprawling city of Chengdu in the southwestern part of the country.
We're now going to take a look at the stories across the globe, and we go first to a news website, which is also leading with our top story of China's President Xi Jinping meeting French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, he touched down yesterday, I believe, and he's there for a 3-day visit. It's relation to trade talks and also the war in Ukraine. And just to add, China is one of France's biggest trade partners outside of the EU. So they are part of quite a big part of their foreign policy and their economic GDP in regards to what they sell and import in between for these 2 leaders. So it'll be quite interesting as to what goes on in these talks, what negotiations come out, as well as agreements. EV cars has been one of the top discussions, as well as the EU and how they see China and its global market.
Yeah, some analysts are calling this trip actually a sort of last-ditch attempt for President Macron to get some good foreign policy in before his term ends. We know he's a bit of a lame duck president, and foreign policy is far easier to achieve than domestic policy in France. At the moment, there's been a big division domestically in France due to there being issues with the budget, protests, and the constant turnover of ministers as well. Francois Bayrou, we will remember a few weeks ago. So the French president here making a massive diplomatic front to China to try and get some last-minute deals in to end his tenure on a good note and to repair relations with China as well.
Indeed. Now we'll go to our next story, which is The Guardian, and I believe that's leading with what's going on in Gaza. An Israeli strike kills 5, including 2 children, says Civil Defense Agency. So just to bring you up to speed with this, reports saying 5 have been killed, including 2 children, and that's in the west of Khan Yunis. Several others were wounded, with some in critical condition, according to a spokesperson, Mahmoud Bassal. And the deaths add to the rising toll in southern Gaza as bombardment continues despite overcrowding and limited access to medical care. Recently, Israel has opened up the strip in regards to Gazans being able to leave and cross the border into Egypt. And also in regards to the ceasefire deal, we don't also know where that sits, because technically a ceasefire should also be in place around this.
Yeah, an interesting point you mentioned there, Nadia, about the ceasefire and the fragility of it, and whether this is even considered a ceasefire at the moment. Now, the Israeli military on this point says it targeted a Hamas terrorist following an armed clash with militants in the vicinity. The incident reflects ongoing disputes between Israeli military statements and Palestinian accounts. The timing comes amid heightened UN scrutiny of civilian protection and repeated warnings from humanitarian agency. Now, Israel maintains that the militants are operating within civilian areas, while Palestinian officials argue the strikes are indiscriminate. This comes as there were also reports of 2 young boys being killed for crossing that yellow line. They were not armed, the reports do state as well. So definitely some contentious issues still happening in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, now let's go to our next story, which is Le Monde, and they are actually leading with what's happening over in Ukraine. And in particular, the European Commission unveils a plan to continue financial support for Ukraine after US aid ends. So the EU has unveiled this plan to help fund the Ukraine with the war through 2026 to 2027 as existing EU aid runs out, as I mentioned, and the move comes as the US has decided to stop its support under the Trump administration, leaving Kyiv and the EU as the primary financial backer. Now, 2 mechanisms are being considered: reparation loan backed by profits from frozen Russian central bank assets in Europe, and a joint EU debt instrument guaranteed by the EU budget, a politically sensitive step. So we know that this is something that Ursula von der Leyen had originally favoured the reparations loan model, but is now acknowledging the need for a backup option due to member state resistance.
Yes, I'll just jump in on there. The plan faces strong opposition. This is not unanimous in the EU by any means, from Belgium and Hungary. Now, we know Hungary is not quite as surprising because Viktor Orban did visit Putin despite calls from the EU not to do so, complicating the search for being a unanimous decision. Belgium opposes using Russian assets due to most of the Russian assets actually being in Belgium itself, which is quite interesting. And the internal divisions come as European leaders try to reclaim relevance in Ukraine discussions, having been sidelined by the US, Russia and more during the mediation talks. So definitely the coalition of the willing and the EU looking to have their say on how the Ukraine conflict can be improved and get to a final ceasefire.
Indeed, and it's a story that we will continue to cover as always. We now go to the next story, which is leading on the BBC, and that's actually to do with what's going on in the US and the late Jeffrey Epstein. So previously unseen images of Epstein's island has been released, along with what was in his home. Now, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released previously unseen photos and videos from Jeffrey Epstein's private island, which I think we're going to play right now. And the images include bedrooms, masks on the wall, which you'll see in a moment, a phone with names on speed dial, and a room containing what happens to be a dental chair. The committee says the release is intended to ensure public transparency and deepening understanding of Epstein's criminal network.
Yeah, some quite eerie images really coming out of here. No one's ever really seen something quite like this from Jeffrey Epstein's island in the modern day as well. So the US Virgin Islands provided the files after a subpoena. Now, new images depict personal items, art pieces, we can see that here, and chalkboard works with words like power, truth and deception. Now, this survivors have long alleged that they were trafficked and abused on the island, purchased by Epstein in 1998. This comes as Donald Trump recently declared that the files should be released, and the ongoing investigation into who was involved and what truly happened on Epstein Island as well.
Exactly. So I'm sure more and more information will continue to come out with those files now being able to be released. And very quickly, we're going to go to the next story, which is leading on our A News website. And that is, we go straight to West Africa. Clashes erupt at Senegal's main university over stipends. And what this is about is there's student anger fueled by delayed or insufficient funds as living costs rise. So demonstrations tied directly to wider financial strain felt across Senegal's youth population. And an internal audit revealed that previous administration left a larger than acknowledged deficit, worsening current economic pressures there.
Yes, clashes broke out at Cheikh Anta Diop University between students and enforcement, with tear gas deployed. Now, unrest reflects a broader erosion of trust between young people and the government. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, a former student and once a symbol of change, is facing criticism after these protests. So definitely a change and a long built-up tension towards these protests.
Indeed. So that was the wrap up of the press news. We're now going to take a short break, and when we return, we will keep you up to date with the rest of the global stories.
If you had to repeat this path, would you do it?
I don't know.
A journey marked not by maps, but by the ones we carry.
Nein.
Ja, doch.
Nein.
This story stretches across continents, empires, and religions. From Germany to Caucasus.
Das ist eine schwere Frage. Du heute nicht.
Story of success, friendship, deportations, and disappearances.
Ночью пришли, арестовали моего дядю, и больше о нем мы ничего не знаем.
A community that rose and almost disappeared.
Его расстреляли в 1937 году. Был расстрелян как немецкий шпион.
This is a story of a migration that shouldn't have survived.
Da gibt es eine schöne Geschichte.
Welcome back to Daybreak. Now let's take a look at the global stories. First, an Israeli airstrike in Khan Yunis in Gaza has killed at least 5 people on Thursday morning. The strike follows Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's vow to respond after an attack on an Israeli soldier in Rafah on Wednesday morning. Here's more.
At least 5 people have been killed and more than 30 injured in Gaza's Khan Yunis after an Israeli airstrike on Wednesday. The strike hit tents in the Al-Mawasi displacement zone, with subsequent explosions near the Kuwait hospital, causing panic among families in the area. 2 children were among those killed. The Israeli military said it was aiming at a Hamas operative but gave no further details. Hamas condemned the strikes as barbaric and indiscriminate, accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire and holding it fully responsible for the consequences. On Wednesday, 5 Israeli soldiers were wounded in the south of the Strip at Rafah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described that as a breach of the ceasefire that began in October. Gaza health officials say more than 350 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire took effect. Israeli authorities say Hamas has killed 3 Israeli soldiers in the same period.
Lebanon and Israel held their first direct talks in more than 40 years on Wednesday. Representatives attended a US-chaired ceasefire monitoring committee in Naura. Lebanese Prime Minister said the talks only focused on last year's ceasefire, including hostage release and Israeli withdrawal, and are not peace talks. Israeli spokesperson Shosh Bedrossan called the meeting a historic development, crediting Netanyahu and noting potential regional cooperation.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is visiting India on Thursday for a 2-day trip, marking his first visit in 4 years. He was invited by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit. The leaders are expected to discuss strengthening defence ties, protecting bilateral trade from external pressures, and exploring cooperation in smaller modular nuclear reactors. On Friday, Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome, participate in the summit, launch the new India channel of Russian state broadcaster RT, and attend a state banquet hosted by President Draupadi Murmu.
So what do you make of that diplomatic front?
I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really good on, and maybe good is quite a strong word in the sense of what is going on the global stage in regards to allies and ties. So we've seen China and Russia come together. We know that India and Russia are also quite strongly related, especially because India was always one of the biggest purchasers of their Russian oil before. That's exactly it, know, things changed with Trump and suspensions of certain Russian oils. So now that Putin is going over there, I think it's quite a deliberate move.
See, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, trying to balance, because he has the main trading partner is actually with the US. And then it's then it's obviously Russia, and they're trying to buy these Russian defense systems and more defense like wartime.
It is, and I think
planes, etc. Is it not an issue?
I think because he's also dabbling in a number of pots, but people need to. I think countries recognise that India is a growing economy and one of the next, the next newest economies coming onto the stage, which the UK is also buying into with their deals as well. They've negotiated with, as you mentioned, the US and Russia. So I think India is in a very precarious spot.
Yeah, are we going to see a fight like a strategic fight for India's ear? So between the US and Russia. Who has Narendra Modi's loyalty? Because we know the tariffs placed on India by the US and by Trump were really damning, and that could have pushed Russia and India closer together as a result.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's all to play for, and I think this is just a power move to show that these two countries are actually.
And RT, the state broadcaster, being
closer.
India, that's a big surprise.
Massive
Would they broadcast
surprise.
in English? Interesting.
There we are. Anyway, so we're going to move to our next story. And there are renewed diplomatic signals from Washington as US negotiators engage with Russia and Ukraine in an attempt to shape a path toward peace. While the talks in Moscow left major issues unresolved, Washington is now turning its focus to Ukrainian leaders for the next steps. Here's more.
The White House has confirmed that US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet Rustem Umerov, the head of Ukraine's National Security Council, in Miami on Thursday. The talks come after Witkoff held nearly 5 hours of discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow earlier this week. The Kremlin said the meeting produced no compromise on ending the war in Ukraine, but that Putin was prepared to keep working to find a compromise. US President Donald Trump described those talks, which also included his son-in-law Jared Kushner, as reasonably good, but warned it was too early to predict any outcome. He said Russia very strongly wants a deal.
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. I can tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. It's a war that should have never been started. It's a war, if I were president, we had a rigged election. If I were president, that war would have never happened. It's a terrible thing, but I thought they had a very good meeting yesterday with President Putin. We'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that discussions with the United States would take place in the coming days. He stressed that any negotiation must be backed with pressure on Russia.
Everything is developing quite effectively right now. At the meetings in Geneva and in Florida, Ukraine was heard and listened to, and this is important. We expect it will continue this way. Only by taking Ukraine's interests into account is a dignified peace possible.
The talks in Moscow followed several days of US meetings with Ukrainian and European officials. Previously, there were concerns that the original US brokered 28-point peace plan leaned too far toward Russian demands. Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov said some of the ideas were more or less acceptable, but others were criticized by Putin. According to reports, there are two major issues that continue to be contentious: the future of occupied Ukrainian territory and security guarantees for Kiev.
Now, Russian forces carried out an airstrike on the city of Slivansk in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast on Wednesday, injuring 8 people, including 2 children. Officials say the strike involved 9 aerial bombs that hit a multi-story residential building. The local governor urged people to evacuate to safety, warning that there were no safe places left in the Donetsk region. On Wednesday, Russia also struck an administrative building with a ballistic short-range missile, reportedly an Iskander-M.
The Romanian military have neutralized a maritime drone that was endangering navigation in the Black Sea, according to the Ministry of National Defence on Wednesday. Soldiers investigated an area 36 nautical miles east of Constanta and found the object to be a Sea Baby type maritime drone. It was destroyed by controlled detonation, and officials say the drone was understood to be developed by Ukraine.
Staying with the Black Sea, Turkey warned that recent attacks are heightening regional security concerns. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan underscored the growing risk to maritime navigation and trade within Turkey's exclusive economic zone and stressed the need for coordinated measures with regional neighbours and NATO.
The recent attacks in the Black Sea in particular have demonstrated how justified the warnings we, as Turkey, have been making since the very beginning. Because the geography of the war is spreading, the methods used are becoming more widespread. This is a very scary thing. Now, because this attack on 2 vessels sailing at open sea within our exclusive economic zone actually endangers navigation safety in the Black Sea, it is making the Black Sea an area closed to trade. It is turning it into an area closed to human transportation.
Poland is stepping up the protection of its national power grid by teaming up with the military. Under a new agreement signed in Warsaw, the armed forces will assist the Polish power grid in securing more than 16,000 kilometers of high voltage lines and more than 110 transformer stations.
Poland is ramping up security for its national power grid amid concerns over potential drone attacks and sabotage. The army will now work directly with the power operator to protect critical infrastructure, including transformer stations and high voltage lines stretching across the country. A formal agreement was signed in Warsaw between the Polish Armed Forces and the Polish Power Grid, PSE.
This will involve assessing plans, security measures, joint exercises, and the participation of the military as an expert institution. It also means transferring experience from Ukraine.
We've had situations where attacks occurred, we can say it, attempts to interfere around the oil terminal managed by PERN. There were drone flights near power stations and transformer stations, so we want to draw on the best practices that the Polish armed forces have today to protect this infrastructure, which will continue to grow and which, those who want to harm Poland, constantly monitor and know is on the front line of our security.
NATO member Poland has faced a series of incidents since 2022, including drone incursions and a recent railway explosion, which authorities say demonstrate Russian state terrorism. The grid, which links Poland to neighbouring countries like Lithuania, is a vital part of Europe's energy network and the focus of increased protection efforts. The agreement marks a major step in safeguarding Poland's energy network, combining military expertise with technical know-how to ensure the resilience of critical infrastructure against future threats.
Now, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has offered rare praise for Donald Trump, crediting him with shifting momentum in efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The comments come as alliance members outline new defence commitments and partners pledge more support for Kyiv.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte declared Wednesday that US President Donald Trump is the only figure worldwide who has succeeded in breaking the deadlock over the war in Ukraine, speaking in Brussels.
Turning to Ukraine, we all want the bloodshed to end, and I strongly welcome President Trump's continued efforts to bring about a just and lasting peace. This is vital for resolving this conflict, and we support the United States in leading this effort. And as negotiations proceed, we cannot waver in our commitment to Ukraine. There is only one person in the whole world who was able to break the deadlock when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and that is the American President Donald J. Trump, and he did.
Rutte also said 2/3 of the member states of NATO have committed to the weapons for Ukraine through the so-called prioritized Ukraine requirements list.
Today we heard from Australia and New Zealand, who will also contribute to Pearl, the first NATO partners to do so. And this means that allies and partners have already committed now really over $4 billion to Pearl, getting us on the track to the $5 billion for the full year. Ministers discussed the planning underway to chart a credible path towards the commitment made in The Hague, investing 5% of GDP annually in defence.
Trump's sweeping 28-point peace plan sees Ukraine cede large swathes of territory to Russia, slash its military, and abandon NATO ambitions. Under the proposal, Ukraine would withdraw from the Donbas regions of Lugansk and Donetsk, areas at the heart of Russia's 2022 invasion, and recognize Crimea as de facto Russian, a status the US would also acknowledge. Kherson and Zaporizhia, regions occupied by Russia, would remain frozen along the line of contact. In total, Russian forces control roughly a fifth of Ukraine's territory. NATO troops would be prohibited from entering Ukraine, and the country would constitutionally renounce membership in the alliance.
We now head over to West Africa, and after what students say were 13 months of peaceful demonstrations, protests in Senegal have turned violent as demands for government financial aid persisted. Security forces used tear gas to disperse the crowds, and several students were injured.
Students and security forces clashed in Senegal on Wednesday after protests over unpaid stipends and other financial support. The unrest comes as the country faces severe financial pressure and a debt load the International Monetary Fund says equals 132% of its GDP. Officials at the country's main university called in law enforcement when students threw stones, prompting security forces to fire tear gas. Students say the government has ignored their demands despite 13 months of peaceful demonstrations. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, a graduate of the university, had vowed to tackle unemployment, corruption and elitism. But since he took office in April last year with President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the government has been criticised by opposition parties over its handling of mounting social and economic problems. An audit ordered by the administration found a larger than expected budget deficit and debt burden left by the previous government, slowing talks with the IMF.
Now to sport, and there's excitement brewing in the world of football. FIFA has provided a look ahead into what many fans can expect ahead of Friday's draw. It's the most watched sporting event and is set to be the biggest in World Cup history. The draw will take place on Friday at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. and is due to start at 5 p.m. GMT. But fans will have to wait until Saturday to see the match schedule, while FIFA work out the best locations for each game. The competition has expanded from 32 to 48 countries, and the games start on the 11th of June 2026.
It's a huge moment. We're all, as a fan, I sit there and watch these events all the time because I want to see where my country is going to be placed, who is the first game, all of these things here that really make for the kind of the build-up. Then the runway into the World Cup, it starts getting tasty, it starts getting tantalising, and you can start really feeling, oh, where we're going to fit out. Look at the route to the final, like semi-finals, the quarter-finals. So all of those aspects really start from here up on this stage. So I can't wait.
World Cup, what do you think?
I love the World Cup. Who doesn't like the World Cup? You know, you turn on your TV and there's just another game and it's always competitive. It's always a good game.
Everyone's involved, obviously. It's covering a number of major countries as it was expanded, as you just mentioned, 32 to 48 different teams coming to play.
That's great, that's fantastic.
I think it's like 6 groups or something, I don't know. But it's interesting because I think the US, Canada and another country just got straight in. They were just able to get straight in.
I think the US be a good host. I mean, a big part of like Mamdani, why he won is he was trying to, say we'll try and make tickets more affordable for New Yorkers and Americans. So as long as they can get that down and stop this dynamic pricing outpricing fans, I think it'll be a fantastic host. I really do, the US thing. Yeah,
well, it's an exciting time. Obviously, yes, the US are the main hosts, and just to see how everyone performs on a global stage next year is going to be quite.
Your prediction?
I'm rubbish at predictions.
No.
Okay, so in the finals, I think it will be France, the usual suspects, France, Germany. I'm not too sure about UK. Shaky times.
UK? Do you mean England?
England, sorry, yes. England, Scotland might be a dark horse. A dark horse. The US, definitely.
You think the US? You think with their country behind them?
I think they could possibly shock us. But I don't know who will be the winners, either maybe Spain or Italy. What do you think?
I'll go with England. Again, they've got to pull through one day.
We say that every time. Every 4 years, we're like, this is
I look forward to the moment where Donald Trump hands over the trophy and somehow gets himself engulfed in the celebration.
Well, we'll see if Jude Bellingham can definitely pull it out the hat.
Yeah,
that's who we're counting on, aren't we? Okay, we're now going to take a break. When we return, we'll discuss the key regional headlines with our studio guest to unpack more. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's take you through the news of what's happening across the region. And first we go to the EU's mission on the Azerbaijan border. Now the EU monitoring mission in Armenia, called EUMA for short, is becoming a longer term presence as Brussels deepens political and security ties with Yerevan. The EU presents it as a stabilizing civilian tool, but its open-ended mandate risks appearing one-sided.
Azerbaijan argues that real peace depends on direct talks and border demarcation, though it still benefits from any mechanism that lowers escalation risks so long as it stays neutral and non-political. The key question is whether EUMA will genuinely reduce tensions or reinforce perceptions of imbalance as both sides work towards peace. Well, joining us now is Sultan Zaidov, a leading advisor at Air Center. Sultan, is it EUMA or EUMA? How do you say it? Just clear this debate up.
We can say it EUMA.
EUMA, okay, good. Okay, I just want to start with, will the EU really leave in 2027, do you believe? And could EUMA stay inside Armenia in another form? And if so, what would that mean for its status?
Well, we truly hope that EUMA will leave Armenia because as per the agreement, text of the agreement on the establishment of interstate relations and peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, if I'm not mistaken, the 7th article of that text clearly states that the parties shall not deploy the forces of the third party along the border. This is important because if you really aspire for peace, sustainable peace, then mutual trust is needed. But if you decide to deploy some, let's say, forces of the third party, then this trust is not existent. So therefore, Azerbaijan demanded that from Armenia, and ultimately it was included to the text of the potential peace agreement. And therefore, if Armenia wants to achieve peace, and it definitely must make sure that those forces are not dislocated along the border. Armenia might, let's say, search for some alternative mechanisms to keep them in Armenia, but not along the border. For example, they might reduce the size of this contingent and call them back to the city centers and find some other ways to keep them in Armenia. But for us, the most important thing is that we see that Armenia, there is a trust between us and Armenia. Armenia, let's say, does not think that Azerbaijan has kind of some other goals with respect to Armenia, and therefore, for that, for building that trust, first of all, Armenia must, let's say, make sure that those forces are not deployed along the border.
Well, let's go to the EU, and what do you think their key interests are in regards to the growing role that they're playing in the South Caucasus, whether or not that's energy routes, transport corridors, or competition with Russia?
Well, if you look at the latest strategic agenda, which was approved between Armenia and the European Union, and the press release of the high representatives of the European Union, namely Kaja Kallas and Marta Kos, we can clearly understand what are the goals, because as they mentioned, one of the goals of this new strategic agenda is to help Armenia combating some hybrid and tackling some hybrid and cyber threats ahead of the Armenian parliamentary elections. And they cited, Marta Kos even cited Moldova as an example, where she stated that there was an interference by Russia to the elections, and therefore they want to make sure that such interference doesn't happen in case of Armenia. So clearly there is a geopolitical goal here. They want to kind of strengthen their grip in Armenia and to make sure that let's put it that way, Armenia is not lost, and Armenia is not once again under the major influence of Russia. There is also geoeconomic interest as well, because as it was stated in the press release, the European Union, as Marta Kos stated, that European Union intends to enhance energy, transportation, and digital connections between Armenia region and European Union, because the European Union understands the importance of South Caucasus. Of course, here Azerbaijan has much more geoeconomic value for European Union, but nevertheless, they want to make sure that this corridor, they call it global gateway, or we call it middle corridor, this corridor is safe, and they can easily, without any serious obstacles, can facilitate the transfer of goods, cargo through Caucasus, then Turkey and to European Union. That's also important. And then we have to take into consideration political processes in Armenia, as there is upcoming elections are coming, and European Union, I believe, wants to show their presence and support for the current government in Armenia, and therefore, for example, it was stated that on May 5th, if I'm not mistaken, there would be a EU-Armenia summit in Armenia, with the participation of the high-level representatives of European Union and Armenia, and this is just almost 1 month let's say 1 month before the elections, and which means that with that one, Armenia's government wants to make sure that the people see that European Union backs the Armenian government, so that they get some more political credit from European Union, which might help them to win the next parliamentary elections.
Okay. And does linking EUMA's timeline to Armenia's needs risk making the mission open-ended? And could that affect Armenia's approach to talks with Azerbaijan?
I believe so. I believe if it also depends on the results of the parliamentary elections, let's put it that way, because we don't know who is going to replace Pashinyan. And the stance of the new, if it happens, the stance of the new government is also, let's say, a matter of great importance here. But there is a high possibility that if, for example, Pashinyan wins the elections and the European Union, let's say, sees the potential for the lasting and sustainable peace in the region, I believe they see it because it was stated also in the new strategic agenda. Then they might demand from Armenia that, okay, our mission did their job, completed its job. They might tell them in that way. So it is time to drag them back from the border. They can be kept within Armenia, somewhere in Yerevan or in other places, but most importantly, they are not deployed along the border, because this will definitely reduce the trust between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is key in terms of building sustainable peace, because peace is not just about signing the treaty. If even the treaty is signed after, let's say, 2026, after Armenia, let's say, amends its constitution, but there are multiple mechanisms which must be implemented in order for that, in order for sustainable peace to endure in the region, and one of them is the trust, the mutual trust between the countries. And by deployment of these forces along the border, this trust definitely reduces.
Well, just on the trust then, do you think closer EU-Armenia defence ties will build stability, or will that make it harder to maintain trust in the peace process overall?
Well, as you already mentioned, the new strategic agenda incorporates various new elements, and one of them is defense and security, as it was mentioned by Kaja Kallas. It should be stated that this is not the first time European Union openly says that they would be supporting Armenia in defense and security. There was this peace facility, European peace facility, which allocated some 10 million euros, if I'm not mistaken, to Armenia. And with this strategic agenda, European Union once again indicated that they are committed to even further increase this partnership in the sphere of security and defense. But of course, it depends on their mechanisms. European Union are going to deploy with that respect. If they, for example, decide to increase the size of the mission along the border, that might definitely ruin the entire peace process. Yeah. If it's just about, let's say, helping Armenia to, let's say, building certain resilience in giving them some small equipments or stuff like that, I don't think it might create a big problem. But if it's about some major projects, including deployment of large number of European Union forces, that would definitely reduce the trust, and that might definitely ruin the entire peace-building mechanisms, which were initiated, by the way, by Azerbaijan after the Second Karabakh War.
Just lastly, how can Azerbaijan work with Brussels to ensure their points are heard as well?
Well, Azerbaijan conducts negotiations with Brussels, and we know that there was a visit by European Union's High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, to Baku in April 2025, and from that meeting we saw some positive environment with respect to Azerbaijan-EU relations, and after that meeting there was a press release in which Minister of Foreign Affairs Ceyhun Bayramov stated that the European Union and Azerbaijan now are in the phase of negotiations over the new agreement. 90% of that agreement is completed, which definitely signals some positive signs with that respect. And I believe European Union especially the last year, tries to pursue more balanced policy in comparison to the previous years. They launched, for example, a new Black Sea initiative on May 28, 2025, which includes Azerbaijan as well. There was multiple important meetings with the participation of EU representatives and Azerbaijani senior officials in the last couple of months, which means that the European Union understands that if you want to be in the Caucasus, they must definitely take into consideration Azerbaijan as the major geopolitical, geoeconomic actor in the South Caucasus region.
Thank you very much, Sultan, for your insights today.
It was a pleasure for me. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Now stay tuned for the rest of the regional stories after the break.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. Now we will turn to the rest of our regional stories. And first, a major development in Europe's energy landscape is unfolding across the Black Sea. The European Commission has moved one of the region's most ambitious energy connectivity initiatives, the Black Sea submarine cable, onto its priority list. This marks a significant step toward deeper integration between the European Union and its eastern partners. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more.
The European Commission has added the Black Sea interconnection cable to its list of projects of common and mutual interest. A total of 235 cross-border energy projects received the status, making them eligible for Connecting Europe facility funding and faster permitting procedures. The project stems from December 2022 agreement among Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania and Hungary to build a 1,000 megawatts, 1,195-kilometer submarine cable under the Black Sea. The link will transmit green electricity from Azerbaijan and Georgia to Romania and onward to Hungary and other European states. In September 2024, the Romanian operator Transelectrica, Georgia's GSE, Azerbaijan's Azerenergy and Hungary's MVM created a joint company to implement the subsea cable project. The initiative also has broader regional implications. Azerbaijan could gain additional transit opportunities and expand the export potential of its growing renewable sector, while Georgia's role as the cable's transit hub highlights its geographic position in linking regional energy supplies with Europe. A feasibility study by Italy's CESI and inclusion in the European network of transmission system operators development plan confirmed the project's technical and economic viability. If adopted as EU regulation, the designation would unlock grant funding, boost investor confidence and speed up implementation. Overall, the cable would advance Europe's diversification efforts and establish a new clean energy corridor from the South Caucasus to the EU. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Now, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the Islamic Republic has closed its security gaps after Israel and US attacked Iran last June. Tehran says it spotted the intelligence vulnerabilities during the war, which lasted 12 days. Our correspondent has more details.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that Tehran has managed to close its security gaps and upgrade its ballistic missiles in the wake of 12-day US-Israel war last June, and at the same time identified weaknesses of Israel's defensive systems. In an interview with the Omani presenter Musa Al-Far'i, he stressed that Iran has a better defense power than it used to have before the start of war in June, both in terms of the quantity and quality. According to Araghchi, Iran not only recognized its weaknesses and fixed them, but it also identified weaknesses of its enemy, based on which Tehran has revised its security plans. Iran and US were in the middle of mediated nuclear talks when Israel attacked Iran on June 13th. Later, US President Donald Trump joined Israel and ordered airstrikes on Iran's major nuclear sites under UN safeguards on June 22nd. The remarks by Iran's top diplomat were made in the interview with Musa Al-Far'i program last November in Muscat, but were reported recently as Iranian and Israeli military and security officials have increased their aggressive rhetoric about possibility of a second major encounter. Turad Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
A technical meeting on cartography in Baku in Azerbaijan has taken on broader significance for the Turkic states. Delegations discuss unified mapping standards, data sharing and regional planning. Here's more.
Sometimes a map is nothing more than lines on paper. And sometimes it becomes a strategic document that defines the future of a region. The second meeting of the Turkic States Organization's Cartography Working Group in Baku begins with exactly this question: how will the Turkic world draw its own map with its own hand? Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkey, and the observers Hungary and Northern Cyprus. The cartographers of these countries have come to Baku to find answers to questions that go beyond technical terminology. How will geographic data sharing be unified? What standards will guide regional planning? What will the unified Turkic world map change?
We have prepared a unified map of the Turkic states. We will present it today, and it will be a very interesting map. It represents almost half of the world.
The maps presented at the meeting are not only for planning, but also form part of the security architecture of the member states.
One of the main purposes of cartography is to provide maps that ensure the defence and security of our state. After the 44-day war, the importance of accurate maps increased even further. Modern systems now allow us to produce 3D and topographic maps in digital format.
Although today's topics may look technical, they actually lay out the future governance model of the Turkic world: standardization of hydronyms, updating border maps, mapping natural resources, digital environmental platforms, a unified GIS database.
We want to exchange technologies so that we are united not only by language, but also by borders and a shared history, so that we can move closer together and bring our country's future closer.
As the Baku meeting wraps up, Azerbaijan hands over this mission to Kazakhstan, the next host of the Cartography Working Group.
We're now going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere.
If you had to repeat this path, would you do it?
I don't know.
A journey marked not by maps, but by the ones we carry.
Nein. Nein.
This story stretches across continents, empires, and religions. From Germany to Caucasus.
Das ist eine schwere Frage. Du heute nicht.
Story of success, friendship, deportations, and disappearances.
Ночью пришли, арестовали моего дядю, и больше о нем мы ничего не знаем.
A community that rose and almost disappeared.
Его расстреляли в 1937 году. Был расстрелян как немецкий шпион.
This is a story of a migration that shouldn't have survived.
Da gibt's eine schöne Geschichte.
Welcome back, you're watching Daybreak on A News. And here are your top headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron meets Chinese leader Xi Jinping for trade talks.
Israeli strikes kill 5 people, including 2 children near Khan Yunis in Gaza.
And clashes between students and security forces break out at Senegal's main university over financial aid. French President Emmanuel Macron is in Beijing for talks with China's President Xi Jinping, his 4th visit as Europe looks to recalibrate its economic and security ties with China. Macron is also meeting China's senior leadership to address strained trade relations and urge progress on the Ukraine crisis. It's the 2nd day of his 3-day state visit. Here's more on that story.
China's President Xi Jinping welcomed his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Beijing on Thursday. It's the 2nd day of Macron's 3-day state visit to China. The 2 leaders attended a welcome ceremony before opening talks aimed at navigating economic and security tensions between Europe and the world's 2nd largest economy. In a meeting with Xi Jinping, French President Emmanuel Macron told that France and China must overcome their differences. Xi also said China was willing to work with France to exclude any interference and make the comprehensive strategic partnership between countries more stable. Macron's 4th state visit is focused on trade at a time when the European Union faces a significant deficit with China, with growing concerns over trade, security, and diplomatic relations. And with Washington's tariffs squeezing global trade, Beijing is seizing the opportunity to present itself as a partner for business, hoping to mollify European concerns over China's backing for Russia and its state-subsidized industrial model. During the visit, Macron is expected to urge Xi Jinping to press Russia towards agreeing to a ceasefire in Ukraine. According to the French presidency, Macron will stress that China must refrain from providing any means, by any means, to Russia to continue the war. In Beijing, alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping, Macron will hold talks with Premier Li Qiang and China's top lawmaker Zhao Leji before traveling on Friday to the sprawling city of Chengdu in the southwestern part of the country.
Now, staying on this story, we're going to delve into it a little bit deeper, and joining me now to discuss it is Osama Rizvi, founder of Rizvi Insights in Lahore, Pakistan. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning to you as well.
My first question in regards to obviously Macron visiting China is China is a dominant trade partner with France outside of the EU, but it's quite imbalanced, which has led to a significant trade deficit. How can France bridge that?
Well, that is a very interesting question, and also a question to which I cannot provide a very positive answer. You see, the issue of China, if we consider it from the point of view of the West, or Europe in this case, has always been that of excess capacity, and some say dumping, some say the trade deficits. I think right now they have around $400 billion of trade deficit with Europe. The Chinese exports to EU has increased 7%, whereas the imports have dropped 2%, now standing at 5%. So this goes on to show that this trend that you just alluded to in your question, it cannot be resolved in the shorter run. In the longer run, maybe if China switches to a consumption-led model, which the country is already trying to do, then in a few decades we may see these imbalances going away. But I don't think any French president or any other country has much leverage in this regard to bridge their gap, with China.
And that's quite interesting because Macron has also stated that he's committed to defend fair and reciprocal market access. Now, what does that statement mean and why is it key?
One of the things that this meeting may entail is that the wider trade war that is happening between China and the US, and as a result of which, the Chinese exports have now diverted towards the EU. They can strike an agreement in principle to maybe ask China to buy more stuff from France and the EU as a whole. That can include many other things, many industries, because once again we need to remember China is at the same time larger exporter but also one of the largest importers of many items in the world. Soybeans, a big demand there, machinery as well, oil, they always need oil. France cannot provide it, but maybe something energy related, something energy products, oil products. These are some of the options that can be exercised. Once again, from being a very pragmatist and realist person, I don't think there is much that will change even after this meeting in terms of the French-China economic trade relationships.
Well, in that sense then, what are some of the main challenges that Macron may face when doing negotiations with President Xi Jinping and signing any agreements with China?
So, there are two purposes to this visit. One is the economic one that we've just discussed. The other one is to ask China to first assist in brokering a peace deal and also to stop Russia, to stop, indirectly funding Russia in its war efforts. And once again, geopolitics takes precedence in this. We have seen that Russia has been one of the largest providers of oil and oil products to China in the previous few years. Both Iran and Russia send majority of their oil to China. And China has become a very price-sensitive buyer. And we need to realize that we are right now in a lower price oil price environment. So I don't think that they're going to stop buying from Russia or Iran at any cost. So that is one point. And, we have seen this also in the case of India. We are living in a very changing geopolitical era where national interest is now taking precedence over ideologies. And the second one, the economic one, once again, they will have to sit down and chart out some sectors. They will need to target a sectoral approach in encouraging China to buy more from France or EU. But if we are thinking that something conclusive will come out of this recent meeting, I do not think so.
Well, we know that it's Macron's fourth visit to China, so it's something that is strong on his foreign policy. But what negotiating power does France have to offer China, who obviously is in a fractious relationship with the US right now? What can be done in France's favour when it comes to China and trade talks?
Well, as a matter of fact, China has more bargaining power here as compared to France. So it's the other way around. One thing that France can help China with is to portray a positive picture or a newly kindled camaraderie between both the countries. We have seen many European countries becoming part of BRI or BRICS overall, and they have struck a lot of agreements with China because trade never stops, whatever happens on the geopolitical front. Maybe on the soft power image sort of a thing, France can help China to get more into Europe, to portray a positive picture, to strike agreements that gives them more access to European markets in terms of people-to-people movement and knowledge sharing and capacity sharing agreements. These are the few points the French president can look at.
And finally, just quickly, you mentioned it previously before, but the war with Russia and Ukraine. Now, obviously, China is a key ally of Russia, and it's something that Macron intends to talk about to see whether or not some type of influence could happen in relation to a ceasefire. Do you think anything could move on that particular goal?
You know, I don't think so. The only two countries that would carry any influence over this peace talk is Russia and Ukraine themselves. There has been a lot of talk of peace deals. It is reaching somewhere in the middle ground, but still I think the concerns of the Ukrainian side would need to be addressed. US intends to play a big role. China can step in. It has always remained neutral on this. If you look at the Chinese doctrine, they don't interfere in other countries' matters. They have a very neutral point of view, but they always insist that they are very, they support coexistence and peace. And if matters come to that point, China would intend to play a positive role. And I think Xi has also alluded or hinted towards such a development in their recent meeting.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rizvi, for joining me this morning and sharing your insights with our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia. That was really interesting insights there. Now we turn to the Middle East, where at least 5 people were killed Thursday morning after an Israeli airstrike hit Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. The strike comes a day after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised retaliation for an attack on Israeli troops in Rafah.
At least 5 people have been killed and more than 30 injured in Gaza's Khan Yunis after an Israeli airstrike on Wednesday. The strike hit tents in the Al-Mawasi displacement zone, with subsequent explosions near the Kuwait hospital, causing panic among families in the area. 2 children were among those killed. The Israeli military said it was aiming at a Hamas operative but gave no further details. Hamas condemned the strikes as barbaric and indiscriminate, accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire and holding it fully responsible for the consequences. On Wednesday, 5 Israeli soldiers were wounded in the south of the Strip at Rafah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described that as a breach of the ceasefire that began in October. Gaza health officials say more than 350 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire took effect. Israeli authorities say Hamas has killed 3 Israeli soldiers in the same period.
Lebanon and Israel held their first direct talks in more than 40 years on Wednesday. Representatives attended a US-chaired ceasefire monitoring committee in Naura. The Lebanese Prime Minister said the talks only focused on the last year's ceasefire, including hostage release and Israeli withdrawal, and are not peace talks. Israeli spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian called the meeting an historic development, crediting Netanyahu and noting potential regional cooperation.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is visiting India on Thursday for a 2-day trip, marking his first visit in 4 years. He was invited by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit. The leaders are expected to discuss strengthening defence ties, protecting bilateral trade from external pressures, and exploring cooperation in small modular nuclear reactors. On Friday, Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome, participate in the summit, launch the new India channel of Russian state broadcaster RT, and attend a state banquet hosted by President Draupadi Murmu.
There are renewed diplomatic signals from Washington as US negotiators engage with Russia and Ukraine in an attempt to shape a path toward peace. While the talks in Moscow left major issues unresolved, Washington is now turning its focus to Ukrainian leaders for the next steps. Here's more.
The White House has confirmed that US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet Rustem Umerov, the head of Ukraine's National Security Council, in Miami on Thursday. The talks come after Witkoff held nearly 5 hours of discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow earlier this week. The Kremlin said the meeting produced no compromise on ending the war in Ukraine, but that Putin was prepared to keep working to find a compromise. US President Donald Trump described those talks, which also included his son-in-law Jared Kushner, as reasonably good, but warned it was too early to predict any outcome. He said Russia very strongly wants a deal.
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. I can tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. It's a war that should have never been started. It's a war, if I were president, we had a rigged election. If I were president, that war would have never happened. It's a terrible thing. But I thought they had a very good meeting yesterday with President Putin. We'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that discussions with the United States would take place in the coming days. He stressed that any negotiation must be backed with pressure on Russia.
Everything is developing quite effectively right now. At the meetings in Geneva and in Florida, Ukraine was heard and listened to, and this is important. We expect it will continue this way. Only by taking Ukraine's interests into account is a dignified peace possible.
The talks in Moscow followed several days of US meetings with Ukrainian and European officials. Previously, there were concerns that the original US brokered 28-point peace plan leaned too far toward Russian demands. Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov said some of the ideas were more or less acceptable, but others were criticized by Putin. According to reports, there are two major issues that continue to be contentious: the future of occupied Ukrainian territory and security guarantees for Kiev.
Russian forces carried out an airstrike on the city of Slavansk in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast on Wednesday, injuring 8 people, including 2 children. Officials say the strike involved 9 aerial bombs that hit a multi-story residential building. The local governor urged people to evacuate to safety, warning that there were no safe places left in the Donetsk region. On Wednesday, Russia also struck an administrative building with a ballistic short-range missile, reportedly an Iskander-M.
Now, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has offered rare praise for Donald Trump, crediting him with shifting momentum in efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The comments come as alliance members outline new defense commitments and partners pledge more support for Kyiv.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte declared Wednesday that US President Donald Trump is the only figure worldwide who has succeeded in breaking the deadlock over the war in Ukraine, speaking in Brussels.
Turning to Ukraine, we all want the bloodshed to end. And I strongly welcome President Trump's continued efforts to bring about a just and lasting peace. This is vital for resolving this conflict, and we support the United States in leading this effort. And as negotiations proceed, we cannot waver in our commitment to Ukraine. There is only one person in the whole world who was able to break the deadlock when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and that is the American President Donald J. Trump, and he did.
Rutte also said 2/3 of the member states of NATO have committed to the weapons for Ukraine through the so-called prioritized Ukraine requirements list.
Today we heard from Australia and New Zealand, who will also contribute to Pearl, the first NATO partners to do so. And this means that allies and partners have already committed now really over $4 billion to Pearl, getting us on the track to the $5 billion for the full year. Ministers discussed the planning underway to chart a credible path towards the commitment made in The Hague, investing 5% of GDP annually in defense.
Trump's sweeping 28-point peace plan sees Ukraine cede large swathes of territory to Russia, slash its military, and abandon NATO ambitions. Under the proposal, Ukraine would withdraw from the Donbas regions of Lugansk and Donetsk, areas at the heart of Russia's 2022 invasion, and recognize Crimea as de facto Russian, a status the US would also acknowledge. Kherson and Zaporizhia, regions occupied by Russia, would remain frozen along the line of contact. In total, Russian forces control roughly 1/5 of Ukraine's territory. NATO troops would be prohibited from entering Ukraine, and the country would constitutionally renounce membership in the alliance.
Staying on Ukraine, experts say control of Donbass could allow Russia to strangle Ukraine and expand westward, with no signs of stopping the war once territory is seized.
Some of the fiercest battles in the Ukraine war are taking place in a region that could shape the future of the conflict, Donbass. But what exactly makes this region so crucial?
Strategically, it is important for Russia because, one, it could mean expanding Russia's territory westward and taking Ukraine's territory by taking Donbass, using, again, this narrative of these ethnic Russians or the Russian speakers to sort of justify the invasion, which has been what we've seen for the last at least 3.5 years. In addition to this, though, beyond Donbass, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Zaporizhia become very important for Russia strategically because it gives them greater access to the Black Sea. As you move westwards in that way, and then even into Odessa, that would essentially cut off Ukraine's access to the Black Sea.
Currently, Russia controls about 88% of the Donbass region and more than 70% of Zaporizhia and Kherson, while Ukraine still holds around 5,000 square kilometers of the Donbass, which most countries recognize as Ukrainian territory.
There is the economic element to it in that the resource there, although the reality is these resources likely will not be able to be accessed for arguably a decade at least because of the mines that are in these regions, the fact that these lands have been completely destroyed, these cities completely flattened. I was speaking with a soldier earlier today who just said, there's nothing left. It's just piles of stones left in some of these cities like Soledar, Mariupol, Bakhmut. There's nothing there anymore because it's just simply stones. I mean, arguably, we would say that actually Russia wants to take all of Ukraine, not just Donetsk. Russia has really showed no indication that it wants to stop this war once it acquires Donetsk and Luhansk. If this were the case, it wouldn't have launched a 2022 invasion. Really, as in the last 10 years, or especially since 2013-14, as we've seen increasing westward integration in Ukraine, and that is only, I guess, fired up, if you will, Russia's desire to keep Ukraine within its control. Donetsk and Luhansk are easier regions to keep it inside control because it has occupied these places since 2014. So it has been able to control them. It has put in, puppet governments. It has put in their own people there. It has built it in its own way. It is in many ways indoctrinating children, etc. Right? You see this. It's able to control these regions in a way that it would never be able to should it now take new territories.
Experts warn that Russia shows no sign of stopping the war once it secures the Donbass, with concerns that taking territory by force could set a dangerous precedent for the 21st century.
Now, the Romanian military have neutralized a maritime drone that was endangering navigation in the Black Sea, according to the Ministry of National Defense on Wednesday. Soldiers investigated an area 36 nautical miles east of Constanta and found the object to be a Sea Baby type maritime drone. It was destroyed by a controlled detonation, and officials say the drone was understood to be developed by Ukraine.
Staying with the Black Sea, Turkey warned that recent attacks are heightening regional security concerns. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan underscored the growing risks to maritime navigation and trade within Turkey's exclusive economic zone and stressed the need for coordinated measures with regional neighbours and NATO.
The recent attacks in the Black Sea in particular have demonstrated how justified the warnings we, as Turkey, have been making since the very beginning. Because the geography of the war is spreading, the methods used are becoming more widespread. This is a very scary thing. Now, because this attack on 2 vessels sailing at open sea within our exclusive economic zone actually endangers navigation safety in the Black Sea, it is making the Black Sea an area closed to trade. It is turning it into an area closed to human transportation.
Poland is stepping up the protection of its national power grid by teaming up with the military. Under a new agreement signed in Warsaw, the armed forces will assist the Polish power grid in securing more than 16,000 kilometers of high voltage lines and more than 110 transformer stations.
Poland is ramping up security for its national power grid amid concerns over potential drone attacks and sabotage. The army will now work directly with the power operator to protect critical infrastructure, including transformer stations and high-voltage lines stretching across the country. A formal agreement was signed in Warsaw between the Polish Armed Forces and the Polish Power Grid, PSE.
This will involve assessing plans, security measures, joint exercises, and the participation of the military as an expert institution. It also means transferring experience from Ukraine.
We've had situations where attacks occurred, we can say it, attempts to interfere around the oil terminal managed by PERN. There were drone flights near power stations and transformer stations, so we want to draw on the best practices that the Polish armed forces have today to protect this infrastructure, which will continue to grow and which, those who want to harm Poland constantly monitor and know is on the front line of our security.
NATO member Poland has faced a series of incidents since 2022, including drone incursions and a recent railway explosion, which authorities say demonstrate Russian state terrorism. The grid, which links Poland to neighbouring countries like Lithuania, is a vital part of Europe's energy network and the focus of increased protection efforts. The agreement marks a major step in safeguarding Poland's energy network, combining military expertise with technical know-how to ensure the resilience of critical infrastructure against future threats.
Lithuania's Vilnius airport had to suspend flights for a second time on Wednesday after suspected balloons were spotted in its airspace. Authorities have linked the balloons to smugglers transporting cigarettes from Belarus. They blame Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. However, Lukashenko denies the accusations and has accused the West of fighting a hybrid war against Belarus and Russia. Vilnius airport has led to close more than 10 times since early October.
We now head over to West Africa, and after what students say were 13 months of peaceful demonstrations, protests in Senegal have turned violent as demands for government financial aid persisted. Security forces used tear gas to disperse the crowds, and several students were injured.
Students and security forces clashed in Senegal on Wednesday after protests over unpaid stipends and other financial support. The unrest comes as the country faces severe financial pressure and a debt load the International Monetary Fund says equals 132% of its GDP. Officials at the country's main university called in law enforcement when students threw stones, prompting security forces to fire tear gas. Students say the government has ignored their demands despite 13 months of peaceful demonstrations. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, a graduate of the university, had vowed to tackle unemployment, corruption and elitism. But since he took office in April last year with President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the government has been criticised by opposition parties over its handling of mounting social and economic problems. An audit ordered by the administration found a larger than expected budget deficit and debt burden left by the previous government, slowing talks with the IMF.
Federal agents have begun a major immigration operation in New Orleans. The Trump administration has paused applications from 19 countries, sparking criticism at home and abroad.
Federal agents swept into New Orleans on Wednesday as the Trump administration opened a new front in its nationwide immigration crackdown. About 250 agents are taking part in Operation Catahoula Crunch, targeting immigrants released from local custody after arrests for crimes such as armed robbery, home invasion and rape. Masked Border Patrol teams were seen patrolling Latino neighborhoods and making arrests across New Orleans, Metairie, La Place and Gretna. At the same time, the Trump administration has suspended all immigration applications from nationals of 19 countries already under US travel restrictions, freezing green card and citizenship processing. The pause affects countries including Somalia, Sudan, Iran, Eritrea, Haiti, Yemen, Libya and Myanmar. The move has sparked backlash abroad. In Mogadishu, residents say the policy unfairly targets whole communities, while in Togo, travel agencies report that visa applications stopping overnight, disrupting business and travel plans.
Since Togo's ban, there are no more visa applicants. This already affects part of our core revenue. We handle ticketing naturally, and so with no more travellers, the business has already taken a hit.
The White House has defended the measures as necessary for national security following last week's attack on U.S. National Guard members in Washington. President Trump has also criticized Somali immigrants and their participation in welfare programs.
I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you.
Since January, Trump has made immigration enforcement a priority, expanding raids, tightening asylum rules and imposing travel restrictions.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he had a calm and respectful phone call with US President Donald Trump about 10 days ago. Maduro said the call could open the door to better communication between the two countries. Reports say Maduro told Trump he might be willing to leave Venezuela if he and his family received full legal protection and the lifting of US sanctions. This call comes after months of US pressure, including actions against drug smuggling operations and threats of stronger measures.
I received a phone call and spoke with President Donald Trump. I can say that the conversation was in a respectful tone, and I can even say it was cordial between the US President and the President of Venezuela. I add that if this call means there are steps towards a respectful dialogue between states, between countries, then welcome dialogue, welcome diplomacy, because we will always seek peace.
Very quickly on that, do you think Maduro will take the safe route and go quietly, or do you think there could be a showdown?
He's been in power almost a decade, and I think if he's had a lot of threats on that along that decade. I think I would be surprised if he chose now to go.
And not put up a fight.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think maybe he might do a twist and turn and say, actually, I will go if I get the legal protection for myself and my family, is what he might do.
Well, we know that the military build-up in the Caribbean, I've heard loads of things, read loads of things, and they're saying, do not be surprised if the US launch something.
Well, that's the thing.
Don't wake up surprised. It shouldn't be
a shock.
Yeah, this is real. This is happening.
It is indeed. Well, we're going to take a very short break. When we return, we'll bring you the top stories from Europe. Stay with us.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. Now, NATO leaders say the stakes have never been higher when the increasing tensions in the Black Sea. Turkey is warning that recent strikes on tankers could spill the Ukraine war deeper into the region and is urging the alliance to act fast. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on the sidelines of the NATO Foreign Ministers gathering in Brussels. A Turkish Foreign Ministry source said the talks focused on ending the war in Ukraine and stabilizing the increasingly volatile Black Sea after a series of strikes on tankers linked to the so-called Russian Shadow Fleet. Fidan warned that the, quote, very scary attacks threaten regional security and commercial shipping, calling them evidence of the war's dangerous expansion. A Turkish official said the warning applies to all parties, including Ukraine. Kyiv has been targeting Russia's oil exports and recently claimed responsibility for drone strikes on 2 empty tankers bound for a Russian port. The fallout is already being felt. Insurers have raised premiums for Black Sea shipping, and several companies have paused Russia-related operations. Fidan urged coordinated NATO action to secure vital routes and ensure safe passage for merchant vessels. He discussed the incidents with his counterparts from Bulgaria and Romania as well, nations that also border the Black Sea. As for Rutte, he reaffirmed NATO's support for maritime safety and Ukraine's defense efforts. He highlighted strong uptake of the alliance's Pearl weapons and supply mechanism, saying, quote, 2/3 of NATO members are already on board. Ukraine's foreign minister, meeting Rutte ahead of the NATO-Ukraine Council session, expressed gratitude for the alliance's continued support. Rutte also warned of Russia's, quote, increasingly reckless behavior, citing cyber attacks and airspace violations. He voiced confidence in the European Commission's proposal to use frozen Russian assets to help fund Ukraine. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that plan, or international borrowing, could unlock up to 90 billion euros for Ukraine. Belgium, which holds most of the assets, raised concerns, but von der Leyen insists those issues were addressed. The focus now turns to the next round of U.S.-Russia peace talks, where the stakes for Ukraine and Europe's security order could not be any higher. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Well, ever since the music streaming services broke onto the scene, we've had better access to our listening habits. The time is now here for the annual review of our favourite songs, most listened to albums, best loved artists and more to be revealed. Streaming giants such as Spotify, Apple Music and Deezer provide different ways of breaking down your habits. Bad Bunny booted Taylor Swift off top spot to become the most streamed artist, and Die With a Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars was the most listened to song according to Spotify. The recap now also includes popular podcasts and some personalised messages to loyal listeners. Wow. Well, you have to ask. I have to ask.
It's come, hasn't it? The Wrapped Unwrapped, what you listened to this year. Yes.
What have you learned about yourself?
What's the number one thing on my... I am actually an Apple Music listener. So Apple gave this to me yesterday, and I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. And it's no surprise, my top one is basically Christian and gospel music is the top. That's literally everything. And then it goes R&B and hip hop.
Okay, so that's surprising. Now, to the viewers, I'm going to out you here. Nadia openly told me that she listens to music mostly when she's in the gym. So you telling me when you're working out, you're listening to gospel music? I'm
listening to gospel, and it's very much like gets me through it. Because gospel music it helps you get through very hard times. And at the gym, I'm going through a hard time and trying to make sure that I stay on the treadmill for more than like 10, 20 minutes.
Would Aretha Franklin count as gospel music?
Possibly. She grew up in the church, so it's very gospel led.
I mean, she's a boss, so I think that's great.
I mean,
mine's way more embarrassing.
Okay,
it's not embarrassing because she's popular for a reason. Take a guess.
Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah. I'm not even joking.
How did I get that? Taylor Swift is your number one.
It's shocking, and then it's like Noah Khan and
come on, I need more credibility.
Kingfisher,
keep going.
Nickelback.
Okay.
But T-Swizzle wins a 23-year-old man.
Music here.
But a 23-year-old boy at heart.
For 2025. Wow.
2025. 2026. So we have to see what happens.
I'm just going to say, so on globally, actually, you mentioned Bad Bunny. Second was Taylor Swift, your favourite. Then it was third place was The Weeknd. Fourth was Drake. And then you had Billie Eilish taking the 5th spot. Then I wanted to go all the way down, and Ariana Grande is 8 and Bruno Mars is 7. So a lot of like US-led pop stars.
They don't really change that much, do they? Bruno Mars been around since the dawn of time. Since
dawn
Mars.
Of time.
But
there you go.
I definitely learned something about myself last night, and I'm not sure I'm happy with the results.
Me too. Well, thank you for watching Daybreak. I've been Nadia Jana.
And I'm Lou Brown. From all of us in the studio, thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow.